Williams has suffered a major early setback for F1 2026 as it has failed to get its car ready in time for the first test in Spain. Delays in the FW48 program have forced Williams to skip the 5-day private test the other 10 teams will be part of this coming week. The first proper on-track running is a huge moment for the teams, so we're going to explain what's gone wrong for Williams, why it's such a major blow, and what you should expect from an unusual test. The key detail missing from Williams' short confirmation of its test absence is the exact cause, but its car build program has been interrupted. Though there was speculation that Williams' chassis is not ready, we understand this is not the case and it's past everything required. That doesn't preclude the process taking longer than expected though, as any failed crash test or problem identified by Williams itself before now will potentially have added weeks of development and manufacturing work to rectify the situation. We're light on specifics, but there are some things we do know and some clues we've been able to pick up on. Williams switched its design focus to 2026 extremely early and had intended to sign off the first version of the car early too to make sure it avoided exactly this situation. So it can't just be poor planning or improper tools like 2 years ago when it had another disastrous winter, and it's understood to not be a result of a supplier or production issue. It therefore must relate to something Williams is responsible for and to a core architecture design like the monocoque or suspension needing reinforcement in some way. This set of rule changes, including a 30kg reduction in overall minimum weight despite the engines getting heavier, has been widely described by F1's most experienced personnel as the biggest combined car and engine overhaul they can remember. In addition to being an intense development exercise, the process has put immense strain on production and manufacturing capabilities, and the FIA has increased its demands of various homologation tests for 2026 too. A packed pre-season schedule with 3 separate tests was designed to give teams as much running as possible, but also made it necessary to hold the Barcelona test in January to fit everything in. This is unusually early and added further strain to the process as it brought all major deadlines further forward. Williams has slipped up in this compressed winter and missed its targets by several days. Williams suffered delays in its production capacity just 2 years ago, and its current technical director of engineering, Matt Harmon, was in charge of Alpine that same winter when it had its own chassis build problems. So the potential for things to go wrong is unfortunately well known to them. The only silver lining is it doesn't seem to be as bad as 2019 when Williams missed almost half of actual pre-season testing and went on to have an awful season with an incredibly slow car. Mentioning delays in its statement means Williams is at least fronting up to something going wrong rather than pretending Barcelona was always considered an optional test, and it is telling that it's pulled the plug entirely. Were it just a minor setback or logistical issue, Williams would almost certainly be aiming to get to Barcelona later than intended, but still with time to run the car. Williams could have got its car out on Wednesday and still maximised its allowed runtime, but it won't. Williams didn't want to disclose to us what could have been possible, like only running it a couple of days of the test or participating with a car compromised in some way. But we understand it decided not to take part in the test in a way that was not how it originally intended, which means running the car properly in its full form. That it has ended up in this position when others intend to run immediately at 9 AM on day 1 of the test, new engine manufacturer Audi had a car on track back on January the 9th, and new team Cadillac did so on January the 16th. In an attempt to mitigate the setback, Williams is planning a comprehensive virtual track test program in place of going to Barcelona. This involves being able to run the real car and engine in a controlled environment, but it is more relevant and detailed than normal dyno testing. The chassis, engine and gearbox will be hooked up together and be put through more specific intense programs. This will involve a detailed run plan, and it's understood Williams will do it over multiple days starting this weekend. Williams has completed a fire-up in the factory, so the car and engine are in a state where they can run quite extensively on a rig, but it clearly implies the team has completed the fundamentals of the build too late to be able to complete the necessary validation work before running anything on track. It's helpful that Williams can do some more extensive work at base to be as prepared as possible for the first Bahrain test, which starts on February the 11th. Doing it this way is designed to get its preparation back on track from that test onwards, so the consequences don't linger into the season. But Williams is undeniably on the back foot, and its plan to mitigate the setback will be blown up entirely if it can't be ready to hit the ground running properly in Bahrain. We'll be there for when or if Williams does get its pre-season together as part of our extensive testing coverage plan, and you can make us your 2026 F1 Paddock Pass by joining the Race Members Club. It's the perfect time to check out a 7-day free trial of the Members Club and see the true picture of what's happening in F1. Come behind the scenes with us for exclusive updates, expert analysis, and bonus podcasts just for you. Just head to the Members Club via the link below to claim your 7-day free trial. For the teams that are going to be at the test, it will be an unusual week by modern expectations given the freedom to run on 3 days out of 5. We've heard one suggested schedule is to run on the first, third and final days. That gives you early learning, a day to fix any problems or run experiments on the simulator, then get back on track and repeat over the final 2 days. But not everyone thinks that way. McLaren and Ferrari have already committed to not running on day 1 and potentially not even day 2 to give them more time to develop the car. So this week will be fascinating for who runs when and what those plans give away about how a team's test is going, but also what else emerges from something taking place mostly behind closed doors. There will be a small video highlights package from each day and interviews over the week with drivers, team and tech personnel, all provided by F1, which is good even though we understand these will all be kept very short. But Barcelona comes with restrictions on imagery and footage teams can publish. This is part of the clampdown on access and coverage, presumably to save the real reveal for the subsequent Bahrain tests. Bahrain pays to host pre-season testing, so it's not hard to imagine the commercial value in saving the biggest content moments for there. That's why Barcelona has recently been labelled Shakedown Week, even though it was always just stated to be and is a test. So what else will we actually get? Some teams are planning to release detailed renders with a split expected between sharing them at the start of the week and later on. And we might get spy photography from outside the circuit perimeter, or maybe even drone footage if anyone is feeling brave and has the equipment, but that all brings a big warning sign with it. Low quality images invite artificial enhancement, overconfident interpretation and outright fakes. We already saw how easy it was for people to be misled around the Audi shakedown imagery. What comes out of the test will be carefully curated, and that will make pecking order clues even harder to come by than normal in pre-season. For example, we're not expecting access to live timing, but there's no guarantee that lap times will be shared at all, either on each day or at the end of the test. Beyond the restrictions imposed on still and moving imagery, the teams have discretion over some elements. If they want to put out daily updates, mileage counts and lap times, they can, and some are definitely planning to do some of that, but there is no obligation. So it could be a case of putting together a puzzle at the end of the week, let alone each day, without having all the pieces. A big reason this test exists and teams are happy for it to be private is they want as much track time as possible because there are so many unknowns that can't fully be answered by dyno testing and simulation. The new engines are a massive undertaking, close to a 50-50 split between the V6 internal combustion engine and electrical power, no MGUH, plus new sustainable fuels. So over the course of the week, mileage should start to tell a story. We won't get a perfect public explanation of every failure, but we'll start hearing which teams are encountering trouble and which aren't. The fuel side is particularly interesting because teams have been given dispensation to use non-homologated fuel for this test alone. It means teams have a fallback option if they are worried about their real fuel status heading into Barcelona, and some must be, otherwise why would anyone have asked or permission been given? Whether we'll get any clarity on who's doing that and who isn't is hard to know, but even the fact this option exists hints at an intriguing technical point to try to monitor. Something we'd love to be able to see up close with our own eyes is the behaviour of the cars on track and any curveballs that emerge. It was the first test at Barcelona in 2022 that exposed the porpoising problem that would be a defining topic that year. Nobody is expecting something as extreme again because the 2026 cars move back to flatter floors and a more known mechanical platform, but that's kind of the point of a surprise, and that doesn't mean there won't be headaches. The drivers are going to be discovering so many things, like how the car behaves over track bumps, what the 30kg weight reduction and slightly smaller car dimensions have done for low speed nimbleness, and the impact of the massive electric power deployment and recovery on throttle and under braking. And teams will learn whether their concepts behave the way they thought they would, or whether something fundamental doesn't correlate. There are other design and setup elements that will emerge too, like more visible use of rake, so we should be able to spot which cars appear to be exploring certain concepts more aggressively. All of this is also further evidence of what Williams is missing out on by being the only team set to be absent from the test entirely.